Welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Fellowship. Welcome to our online and on-the-ground religious home. We're so glad you are here. If you are new to our community, I want to share that we are spiritually alive, justice-centered, and radically inclusive. One thing that you might hear a Unitarian Universalist say is, we believe in deeds, not creeds. It's important to us to put our faith into action in the public square through community service and organizing, advocacy, and public witness. In fact, I am wearing my collar and stole today because I participated in a funeral procession, protest, and candlelight vigil organized by Black Lives Matter Morristown and Wind of the Spirit this weekend. We joined with Unitarian Universalists and people of faith around the country who are bearing witness to grief and anger, resiliency and resolve in the wake of the senseless killing of George Floyd. By the way, if you are new to our fellowship, you can visit our website at www.muuf.org to learn more about us and upcoming events. And you can also like and follow our public Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Morristown Unitarian. Welcome to our weekly worship. Let us open our eyes and minds, hearts and hands to receive and to bless one another and our world.
Good morning. Today I light the chalice to remind us that love is the spirit of this fellowship and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
I have a story for you today. The Boy with Big, Big Feelings. Written by Brittany Wynn Lee and illustrated by Jacob Suva. There once was a boy with feathery hair and a heart that was bursting with feeling. His emotions seemed bigger than everyone else's, and sometimes they made him go reeling. When playing outside on the yellowest days, a loud truck might rumble on by. And wouldn't you know it, that big heart of his would push feelings right out of his eyes. At night, when the shadows would form on the walls and fear would steal all of his rest, those feelings of his made it so hard to breathe as they jumped up and down on his chest. Sometimes, when his play had come to an end or things didn't go as he'd planned, the feelings would run down the length of his arms and clench when they got to his hands. He felt happy feelings as big as the others, from tickles and hide and go seek, and jokes and races, and stories and songs that made feelings glow on his cheeks. Beautiful things would stick in his brain and not leave for hours and hours. The fur of a dog, a fluffy white cloud, his mama, a banjo, some flowers. But when someone he'd loved had a very hard day, he'd feel he'd been over-equipped to feel all their feelings as deeply as they, which would quiver right out of his lip. He wondered, why me? Why this big giant heart in a world so heavy and kind, where all of the feelings under the sun feel as if they were made to be mine? So the boy tried to stuff all his feelings deep down, to control what he thought he should hide, afraid that the others would make fun of him if they saw all he felt deep inside. Would they think he was weak, dramatic, afraid? Would they call him a wimp or a baby? If they saw the big heart thumping in his chest, would they not want to play with him maybe? But while swinging one day, feeling oh so alone, he noticed a girl feeling blue. He marveled. What's that? Could it be? Yes, indeed. Her emotions were extra big, too. Are you okay? The boy asked the girl. I'm fine, just sometimes I get sad. He said, You do? Hey, I get sad too. I get scared and silly and mad. The two became pals who shared their big hearts, not feeling they had to pretend when they needed to cry or to laugh big and loud, since their feelings had helped them make friends. And soon they noticed there were other big hearts in the classroom, the playground, the bus. And they smiled as they learnt it was not just them. Big emotions affect all of us. The boy and his friends slowly felt less alone with the feelings that live deep inside them. Emotions might feel big and scary sometimes, but that is no reason to hide them.
We laugh, we cry, we live, we die. We dance, we sing our song. We need to feel there's something here to which we can belong. We need to feel the freedom just to have some time alone. But most of all, we need close friends we can call our very own. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a need to be together. We have our hearts to give. We have our thoughts to receive. And we believe that sharing is an answer. A child is born among us and we feel a special glow. We see time's endless journey as we watch the baby grow. We thrill to hear imagination freely running wild. We dedicate our minds and hearts to the spirit of this child. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a time to be together. And with the grace of age, we share the wonder of youth. And we believe that growing is an answer. Our lives are full of wonder and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories we shared with friends, they will linger on and on. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow. We have the gift to believe that peace within our living is an answer. We seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. And then we come together here to make sense of what we find. And we believe in life and in the strength of love. And we have found a joy being together. And in our search for peace, maybe we'll finally see even to question truly is an answer.
We grieve with our nation at the violent death of George Floyd as a result of police brutality, specifically Officer Derek Chauvin placing a knee on George Floyd's neck until he stopped breathing. We name the brokenness of our system of mass incarceration, which disproportionately locks up Black and brown people and promotes an atmosphere where officers can get away with murder. We join with Unitarian Universalists around the country in saying, enough is enough. George Floyd was a son and a father, and his life mattered, and his death matters too. We light a candle to honor his memory, and we hold his 6-year-old daughter and all those that are missing him most in our prayers. May they find places for their anger and their grief. May they find spaces of healing and hope. We also name that George's death is far from the only example of how white privilege and supremacy culture ripples out to create a context of danger for the bodies and lives of Black adults and children. I will drop a pebble to name recent examples that we are holding in our hearts. Christian Cooper was birding in Central Park this week when Amy Cooper called the police on him when he simply asked her to leash her dog. Ahmaud Arbery was out for a jog in the end of February when a retired police detective and his son shot and killed him in Georgia, where there are no hate crime laws on the books. Brianna Taylor, an EMT who aspired to become a nurse, was sleeping at her home in Louisville when the police bust down her door, discharged their weapon, and killed her. And just a few days ago, Tony McDade, a Black trans man, was shot and killed by police in Tallahassee. We mourn, we pray, we protest, we commit to change.
A reading adapted from The Sacred Depths of Nature by Ursula Goodenough. How are emotion and feeling and meaning and symbolism brought into a religious framework? Let's begin with William James. There must be something solemn, serious, and tender about any attitude that we denote religious. If glad, it must not grin or snicker. If sad, it must not scream or curse. It is, I believe, our capacity to apprehend the meaning and the emotion embedded in symbols that endows us with our capacity for empathy. Empathy, in the end, is the ability to imagine what it is like to experience something, the ability to put oneself in another's shoes. It is a higher primate capacity, but not exclusively human. Once there is empathy, then there can be the feeling we call compassion. A version of the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is found in most religious traditions. It is as we can imagine being the least of these that we can begin to experience the anguish of deep poverty or deprivation. It is as we are able to identify with the oil-soaked shorebird and the bewildered moose that they come to symbolize our environmental concerns. And emergent from our sense of compassion, in mortal conflict with our insistent sense that we should win, is our haunting sense that things should be fair.
Good morning. I want to take this opportunity to thank those of you who have pledged in this year's annual budget drive. We are getting close to our goal. If you have not had the opportunity and would like to, you may pledge in Realm or reach out to the annual budget drive committee. You can reach us at abd@muff.org. Every week, we take up a collection that is split 50-50 between the fellowship and a community organization. This week, it's being split with the Soup Kitchen, now known as Nourish New Jersey. So be generous and help our community.
I'd like to introduce you to the guest musicians who will be performing our offertory today. Over 140 of them, to be exact. My dear friend Adam Pod, who is the music director at First Unitarian Brooklyn, together with his twin brother Matt Pod, put together this incredible video in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In the 3 weeks since it has premiered, it has surpassed 113,000 views on YouTube, averaging 5,000 views per day. How can I keep from singing?
No storm can shake my inmost heart, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? First I learned to love it, no storm can shake.
One of the great strengths of Unitarian Universalism as a movement is that when functioning at its best, it embraces the idea of religious pluralism. That is to say, it adopts an attitude respectful of diverse religious systems. Now, that has led some critics of our movement, and more than a few of our own, to claim that UUs can believe anything they want to. While that statement is not true, it is a core foundation of our faith that there will never be a creedal test imposed to determine who can be a Unitarian Universalist and who cannot. We do have our principles and our sources, and they help us to articulate our values. Our community is comprised of some who bring a particular religious identity, some with multiple religious identities, and some who claim none at all. Whatever the case, as always, you are welcome to bring your full self here. Over the course of my internship so far, I've had the opportunity to share from some aspects of my religious identity. One such identity that deeply influences my faith is the perspective of religious naturalism. So, what does it mean to say that I am a religious naturalist? Now, my intent today is not to provide an overview of religious naturalism per se. First, because it isn't really possible to do justice to that task in a single service. But perhaps more importantly, because I think it's far less effective to talk about religious naturalism in the abstract, as it is to explore how a religious naturalist perspective actually impacts experience. So I thought I would do that today. Over the last few weeks, I've been wrestling with the understanding of the variety of human responses that we've seen in this pandemic. On the surface, the reactions really seem to be all over the spectrum. For some, the primary response has clearly been one of fear. Others have displayed resolve, some determination. There is concern and disbelief, anger, resignation, even hope and curiosity. Internally, my own responses have varied, not only day to day, but sometimes moment by moment. I have at times been encouraged and at other times outraged. I've also been completely flabbergasted by some responses that I see that I struggle to understand and I certainly cannot condone. And acknowledging that we all bring our own complicated context to our experience, the question still remains, how can such diverse responses to essentially the same stimuli result? Now, I've been acculturated by my Western education to look for understanding in the process of categorization. So one way of trying to make meaning would be to distinguish between responses that are driven primarily by emotion in opposition to responses that are driven primarily by reason. Western culture since the Enlightenment has privileged reason over emotion. So does that explain it? Is it that some people, usually by some I mean those who take a different understanding than me, are they just driven by an inferior appeal to emotion? Do I think that if only those people could embrace the superior appeal of reason, as I no doubt represent, that we would be closer to consensus? It certainly feels like a lot of our discourse is being framed in exactly this way. The mantra seems to be, well, if only everyone responded to this the way I am responding, then we'd all be better off. But if I bring my religious naturalist lens to this arena, what might it tell me? Specifically, what might it say about the role of emotion and the making of meaning? In her book, Sacred Depths of Nature, Ursula Goodenough, professor of biology emerita of Washington University in St. Louis, notes that the evolution of awareness has spun off two important capabilities. The first is that organisms usually attach value to the things they perceive. The second is that organisms usually attribute meaning to something of which they're aware. Value and meaning. Now that first capability, value, in complex animals like us, is experienced via neural and hormonal emotional systems. The second, by those systems that give rise to our capacity to think and to act symbolically. Our brains, like those of other mammals, evolved an incredible limbic system that has four major components: the hypothalamus, the amygdala, the thalamus, and the hippocampus. Our emotional responses, neurologically speaking, are awe-inspiring. I mean, consider how the process works. In response to a visual perception, such as seeing a potential threat, those visual impulses go straight to the amygdala that might immediately trigger a freeze response. And simultaneously, it activates the autonomic nervous system, which releases adrenaline. And the adrenaline changes our heart rate and our blood pressure. Those responses, they don't require any conscious thought on our part. They simply just happen. So in some ways, our physiological emotional response just happens. It is a response. But those raw emotional responses aren't yet feelings. You see, feelings seem to arise and therefore presuppose conscious self-awareness. And herein lies an important observation. With all due respect to the generally privileged white men whose ideas gave birth to what we refer to now as the Enlightenment, and by extension to the dominant Western culture that they empowered, that binary of separating feeling from reason is ultimately only a construct, and a false one at that. All of our feelings, whether we're talking about the so-called primitive animal instinct of fear, or those higher value feelings of love or joy or astonishment, they are in reality a combination of our capacity to integrate value and meaning. It's not thoughts versus feelings. It's not reason versus emotions. It's far more complex than that. And I agree with Ursula Goodenough that our capacity to apprehend meaning and emotion is what provides for the possibility of empathy. And empathy is so necessary and in seemingly short supply right now. More than ever, we are called to imagine what it's like to experience something from another's point of view, to put ourselves in another person's shoes, and empathy is the gateway to compassion, which in my view is nothing less than sacred. As I was preparing for today, my expectation was that my challenge to you was going to be phrased as a call to extend empathy in the midst of this pandemic, to challenge you to empathize even with those with whom you might strenuously disagree. I anticipated that this would be an invitation to see the humanity, even in the person with whom you disagree about the proper response to COVID-19. Now, to be perfectly clear, I would have not in any way suggested that you needed to agree with, condone, or tolerate behavior that is literally life-threatening. But instead, it would have been an invitation to acknowledge the inherent worth and dignity even of those with whom we disagree. And that's what I thought the context would be. And then the events of this week transpired. On Memorial Day in South Minneapolis, police officers responding to a call about an alleged use of a counterfeit $20 bill murdered George Floyd. Murdered. And in the days that have followed, my concern for understanding how emotions and meaning impact whether or not we wear a face covering in public feels so irrelevant. I am struggling right now. I am struggling with questions of emotions and meaning in the wake of yet another vicious crime against Black bodies. And I find myself challenged in my white skin to ask again, do Black lives matter? Do they? Do they really matter? And if so, then by all that is sacred, is it not past time to move beyond reasoned, rational, tempered responses? Can we embrace a truth that embodies the fullness of the righteous anger and the demand for real justice and systemic change? Not soon, not later, but now. The final words in today's reading resonate with me in a new way. Hear them once again. Once there is empathy, then there can be the feeling we call compassion. A version of the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is found in most religious traditions. It is as we can imagine being the least of these that we begin to experience the anguish of deep poverty or deprivation. It is as we are able to identify with the oil-soaked shorebird and the bewildered moose that they come to symbolize our environmental concerns. And emergent from our sense of compassion in mortal conflict with our insistent sense that we should win is our haunting sense that things should be fair. Friends, if we wish it to be so, it is our responsibility to make it so.
Find a stillness, hold a stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony. Seek the essence, hold the essence, let the essence carry me. Let me flower, help me flower, watch me flower, carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
One final thing to share with you this morning. Throughout the month of June, as a community, we're going to be exploring the concept of gratitude. Even in the midst of great sorrow, there is so much for which we can express gratitude. As part of that, I wanted to share a particular spiritual practice that I have and invite you to consider adding it for yourself over this next month. Journaling is a primary practice of mine, and one of the techniques that I've adopted is I keep one page, and at the top I write gratitude. And then over the course of that journal, I will regularly return to that page and add maybe a word or two, sometimes a sentence, or maybe just a little doodle or drawing, all to record those experiences of gratitude. Some people make that part of their daily practice. For me, it works better in a little less structured way. But I found that I will return to those pages over and over again, and that they become really meaningful. So I offer that invitation to you with gratitude. Go now in peace.